Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start with the webinar. Today, we're going to talk to you about some security changes that we've been building for the Connexys product, and we'd like to walk you through those. So I'll start with a quick introduction of the team here who's been working on this webinar. We have Tom, who's a technical operations engineer that many of you probably have met. We have Alexander, our engineering lead, to help answer questions. We have Annika and Greta from marketing and product marketing to help us out. And my name is Jordan, I'm the product manager. And together with Tom, I'll be your speaker for today. So let's start with a quick introduction of what we're going to talk about. Security is, of course, always an ongoing process, and we've been working on many of them in the past 3 months and the next 3 coming months. But we're going to highlight 3 of those today because they have potential impact for you or your customers, hence why we felt the need to discuss them. So yeah, security, it's an ongoing process. It's an important topic throughout the industry, and that's also includes Salesforce. So we're in close lines with Salesforce to talk about the latest standards in security and how we can meet them. So that's what we're doing with these changes. It's important for you guys to be here to really understand what we're changing, why, and how, especially how it impacts you and how we can mitigate for those impacts. And today, through the slides, we'll discuss a couple of releases. So I quickly want to go over those. We have 18, which is currently live. We have 21, which is a minor release coming mid-December, and we have 22, which is a full public release around March. And these 3 releases have a lot of security fixes, which 3 of those we'll be highlighting. Of course, slides, recording, and some other materials will be shared afterwards to all attendees. So the 3 topics we're going to be discussing today are cross-site scripting prevention, improving field-level security on custom pages, and securing data safer, where we're going from redaction to encryption. Of course, there will be plenty of time to ask questions. The presentation will be relatively short. A lot of time to answer your questions. Once they rise up during the presentation, feel free to throw them in the chat box so that the team can start preparing answers for them. You can ask them at any point that you want. So let's dive into it. We're going to start with cross-site scripting prevention. And we're going to start with like a quick introduction of what it is. It is a type of injection attack where malicious scripts are added to the website that you wouldn't want to be there. And basically, to summarize it, they make your web page do something that it's not supposed to. I have a little anecdote of when I was a teenager building websites for games. I ran into this problem because I made a tool that was getting a little more popular, and I wanted to know how many people visited that tool. And that was before I really had a knowledge of databases and how to build stuff that myself. So what I did is I found a website where I could make a very custom page counter with all kinds of cool graphics. So created that and I added it to my website. And the next day I had dozens of messages telling me people were getting malware warnings on my website because this counter, even though it was counting the people as I'd like, was doing a lot more than just that. So that's just an example of how it can happen and something we want to help you prevent. So what are we changing? Well, we're adding cross-site scripting protection throughout the application, and this basically applies to all the places where we currently allow you to add custom code, be it HTML, CSS, or even some JavaScript. We're going to help prevent you from adding potentially malicious code, and this will in turn result into a reduced potential for these type of attacks. And again, like everyone trusts their admins, of course, or their consultants, but it's even a mistake you can make by accident, like I did a couple of years ago. So how does this impact you? Well, it means we'll be, for many fields, we'll only be allowing a whitelist of HTML tags that are deemed safe. And that's happened from release 18 onwards. So if you or your customer takes release 18 or onwards, you'll only be able to use these fields with a whitelist of tags. This whitelist will be shared after the webinar, and it contains basically all the tags that are safe to use, and will always be continuously working on seeing if we can add more fields if they're deemed safe. Additionally, we're going to be locking the before and after HTML functionality after taking a release 21 onwards. The before and after HTML is often used, for example, for the apply pages where you can add custom branding, stuff like that. And it currently allows for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We're going to be locking that, which means that all code that is in there before taking release 21 or later will remain active. It will remain working, but you cannot edit or add to it anymore. Of course, there are many alternatives for the functionalities offered there. So if there's any questions on that, you can always ask now or at a later stage. The next topic, I'll hand over to Tom.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Tom. I'm going to tell you something about the CRUD FLS changes that we're going to put forward in the application. First of all, I would like to briefly touch the topic of what is CRUD FLS. I think most of you in this meeting will know, but I'm going to go over it anyway. So object and field level security are configured on profiles and permission sets. And can be used to restrict access to standard and custom objects and individual fields. So basically, CRUD FLS is used to configure what kind of data users can view, what they can edit, and also what can they delete. So now I just want to go to the what are we changing and why part. So as part of our continuing efforts to ensure the highest level of security within Bullhorn Connexys, we will be rolling out some changes in our March release. Release 22, that is, that we wanted to make you aware of. Going forward, every aspect of the application, including custom pages, will have an absolute adherence to the profile permission model built into Salesforce. Before, our product did not fully respect all of the CRUD FLS settings. We had built it that way to ease in the process of implementations. As you know, so in the past, our customers' configuration also did not warrant this enforcing of CRUD FLS. But over the last years, we've realized that some of our customers, especially the bigger ones, require a broader scale of utilization of the Salesforce platform and are unable to leverage the full scale functionality unless CRUD FLS is enforced. So by doing this, we also grant our customers more control over what the users can see. Then I want to touch the impact. How does this impact you? Well, if your configuration is correct, as in, every user has permission to exactly what they need, you will not notice any impact at all. So, for example, customers who have enabled CRUD FLS after release 18 and have already worked on that and changed some configurations and the testing, they will not have to do anything, basically. Of course, a brief check is always a good thing, but you should mostly be covered. Customers who however, have not done this will potentially have to make changes to their user profiles. If this is not done properly, some pages may no longer function as they are supposed to, and it is therefore important that admins test each profile individually to ensure that functionality will not break. Of course, we also offer an easy way for your admins to figure out which changes are required. What happens is, in case a page is not correctly configured for the logged-in user, an error will display on top of the page, containing the exact instructions for the admin on what to do next. So it will contain a message like, this user does not have access to field X on object X, and the admin can go to that specific object in the profile and add the permissions if necessary. CRUD FLS can also be enabled per profile, so they can be ticked off one by one, and we of course recommend doing the changes and the relevant testing in a sandbox environment. Now I'll pass it back to Jort.
Yeah, so the last topic that we want to highlight today is securing data safer, where we're going from redaction all the way to encryption. To start this, I want to start with a couple of simple definitions. Maybe many of you already know these, but just to make sure that everyone does, I'll go over them. So redaction means that we're storing the data in basically plain text, and whether we show it on the front end or not is dependent on stuff like permissions, etc. Hashing means that we're storing the data not as plain text, but hashed, which encoded in the database, which means that even someone who has access to the database can no longer read it. Important differences with hashing, it's one way. Once you've encoded it like that, you can no longer reverse it. So it's often used for stuff like passwords that you don't need to read anymore. Encryption, however, is two-way encoding, and it can be reversed if you have the encryption key. An example I always use is children making coded notes to one another where 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C, etc. Basically, that is encryption in a very, very simple form, but it's always two-way reversible. You can encode it and you can decode it. So for the purpose of today's meeting, we're not going to be talking about hashing, but only about redaction and especially encryption and what it means. So what and why are we changing? Well, currently we have some information that users shouldn't be able to see that's currently often redacted. And from release 18 onwards, some of the sensitive data is actually being stored encrypted. So we're further improving the security of some of the sensitive data. And this should generally not impact you at all, because all the Connexys logic will remain working the same. All integrations within the package will remain working the same. It's only if you have a lot of customizations outside of our package that you may need to make a couple of changes. Because you'll have to decrypt some of these encrypted values using a new method, which is a single line of code that you would need to add. And then everything will work again. And we'll have a full list of those encrypted values available, and it will be part of the package that we share with you after the webinar. So if you have a lot of customizations that affect those encrypted values, keep this in mind. Additionally, if you're copying encrypted data from sandbox to production, it will not work because the encryption keys are different between the orgs. So you'll have to decrypt the values first before you copy them over. So now we're going to get to the Q&A part. So I'll check if you guys have added any questions, but we'll review a couple of questions to begin with that we had this morning in our Dutch version of the same webinar. So one of the questions there was if this were related to GDPR, and it's not. We are already GDPR compliant. This is purely a security effort, and it's independent of any GDPR related changes. Additionally, we had a question about whether this was for Classic or Lightning, and it's for both. We had one more question on why the before and after HTML functionality that we just discussed that we're locking cannot also use the whitelist like the other custom fields do. And that is because we've reviewed what before and after HTML is often used for, and we've noticed that in almost all the cases that would not be in accordance with any whitelist, not even remotely. So locking it didn't make a lot of sense, or using the whitelist didn't make a lot of sense because that could definitely not fulfill the use cases that this functionality is used for. Locking it would improve the security and would also make sure that we're not losing potentially very critical use cases with this functionality. That were some of the questions that were coming in this morning. So far, we haven't had any questions from today. So if you do, please do add them to the chat box, and we'll look into those and we can answer those. So we'll take a minute or two and see if any questions come in. We might need a couple of seconds to answer any questions so that we can discuss them between ourselves. Okay, we just got a first question. Give us a couple of seconds whilst we prepare an answer and come back to you.
So a question came in from Marco. Marco's question is, do the security changes in the product also make sure that JavaScript can no longer be executed via uploaded documents in the candidate document preview? Unfortunately, this is not the case, and that has to do with that we make use of the internet client's PDF viewer. So this is basically out of our control. You know, when a user is logged in through Firefox, they use the Firefox PDF viewer. If they're logged in through Chrome, they use the Chrome PDF viewer. So unfortunately, we have no influence over that part. Okay, so we got another question coming from Dennis. Dennis is asking, what's the FLS change about? Does it mean Lightning components and Visual Force pages always reflect FLS of the current user instead of running in system mode? So what I can answer to that is that all the pages run from the user, from the current login user. Yeah, I think that's the answer basically.
Yeah. They always run from the user.
Exactly, yeah. But I think what's maybe useful for Dennis to know that before, not all the pages fully respected the FLS and CRUD settings. So sometimes you would have a custom page, let's say a wizard in our product, and you configured it that a certain user should not have added access to a date of birth field, for example. Before, it could be the case that the user still had access to the date of birth field. In the new situation, they won't have access to this anymore. So basically, you have more control over what your users can see. If you say in the profile setup, this user cannot see this, then they can actually not see it.
Okay, that's it with regards to questions that we've been receiving from you today. If you run into any other questions, or once you've received the package with more details and have reviewed it and you come up with, oh, hang on. We have one more question coming in last second. Give us 2 seconds, please.
So we got another question from Dennis. Dennis is asking now, how do you guarantee that Connexys still works? Let's say I remove edit rights on email or candidate, or maybe maybe remove view access. Well, the answer to that is it's also a matter of testing. So that's why we're starting with this early. It's very important that the admins working for the customer are now turning on CRUD FLS and just start testing with all the different profiles, test all the pages. Let's say a user doesn't have the proper access to a page. In case of a missing view permission, it will state on the top of the page that this candidate is not seeing everything that is on the layout, and instructions for the admin how to fix this. Let's say it's an edit permission issue, then it will say the exact same after trying to save a record, saying, hey, this user actually needs access to this, and it also has instructions for the admin to fix this. Also, if you talk about emails, we also have a mechanism like that in place. So if you're trying to send an email and you don't have permission to everything, you will also receive an email with the instructions on what is needed in order to properly send the email.
Okay, well, we'll give you one more minute to add any more questions if you have them. So let us know. Use the chat box, just type it in and we'll, okay. Dennis, you're welcome. Next question coming in, so 2 more seconds.
So we got another question from Marco. The question sounds, can access to fields in wizards also be defined on field level or only on field set level? Well, the answer to that is that it will only be on field level. If you look at field sets mostly define what you want to show. It doesn't say what everybody can see. So actually before we didn't fully adhere to the access when it came to wizards, but now if a field is on the wizard, the user that is going to interact with the screen definitely needs view and edit access.
So that was our last question so far. So we'll give you, like, if you're still typing, feel free to edit. We're still available. So far, it looks like our biggest question askers are done asking questions. You're welcome, Marco. In that case, I think we'll probably be ready, unless like a question last minute pops in. Like I said before, if you have any other questions and run into at a later stage, feel free to reach out. We'll definitely be able to help you. So we still have a lot of time until March. So if you ever run into anything, just reach out and let us know. And we'll be sending some more material sometime this week, where we'll share all the stuff that we discussed in this webinar, like which fields and objects are going to be encrypted, which pages are going to be affected, etc., etc. So let us know if you run into anything, and thank you for listening today, and till next time.
Have a beautiful day.
Have a nice day.